Welcome to Healthy Kidneys After 60, a space where we peel back the layers of time to rediscover the strength our bodies still hold. I am your host, Jane Pauley. Today, we are not just talking about health, we are talking about freedom. The freedom to walk, to climb, and to live without the fear of our own legs giving out. Joining me is a man who has spent over 5 decades witnessing the resilience of the human frame, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Doctor, thank you for being here with us.
It is a profound pleasure to be here, Jane. You know, in my 50 years of clinical practice, I have seen tens of thousands of patients who felt their world shrinking because they believed weakness was an inevitable shadow of aging. But being here today, I feel a sense of urgent hope. I want to share that the frailty we often accept as fate is, in many cases, just a silent hunger of the muscles, a hunger we can satisfy. I am truly grateful for this opportunity to speak directly to those who feel they are losing their stride, because the science of recovery is more beautiful than most people realize.
Doctor, I want to start with something I noticed the other day while I was at a local park. I saw a gentleman who must have been well into his 80s navigating a steep, grassy slope with such grace and steady footing, while right behind him, a man much younger, perhaps barely 60, was clutching the handrail of the nearby stairs, breathing heavily and looking visibly uncertain about each step. It was a striking contrast that stayed with me all evening. It made me wonder about the silent anxiety so many of our listeners feel when they look at a flight of stairs or a long hallway. We often tell ourselves, well, I'm just getting older, but seeing that older man move so effortlessly challenged that entire narrative. Why is it that some people seem to retain this incredible structural integrity while others, decades younger, begin to feel like their legs are turning into lead? Is there a biological secret that separates those who remain mobile from those who start to retreat into their armchairs out of fear?
Jane, what you witnessed in that park is the perfect visual representation of a phenomenon we see in the lab every day, and it touches on the deepest fears of aging. That younger man isn't just getting old, he is likely experiencing the early silent stages of what we call sarcopenia. Now, I don't want to use heavy medical jargon, but think of it as a slow, invisible erosion of the very foundation that holds you up. After we cross the age of 60, our bodies begin to change the way they process the world around them, especially how they maintain muscle. Research from places like Harvard and the University of Washington has shown us that muscle loss actually accelerates significantly during this decade. It's not just about looking fit, it's about the fast-twitch muscle fibers, the ones responsible for catching you if you trip or helping you stand up from a deep sofa, gradually thinning out. Most people think they are losing their balance, but in reality their muscles are simply losing the power to respond to the brain's commands. It's a terrifying feeling when your brain says step and your legs feel like they are stuck in mud, and that uncertainty leads to a sedentary lifestyle which only makes the muscle loss worse. It becomes a downward spiral where the fear of falling becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and people start giving up their hobbies, their walks, and eventually their independence.
That description of stuck in mud is exactly what I hear from so many people. They feel a heaviness that wasn't there 10 years ago. It's as if the connection between the mind and the feet is being frayed like an old wire. I think many of us have just accepted this as a natural tax we pay for living a long life. We see our parents slow down, we see our neighbors start using canes, and we assume our turn is next. But you mentioned something that caught my ear, that this erosion might be silent and invisible, yet you also hinted at a sense of hope. If this muscle loss is accelerating after 60, are we just fighting a losing battle against time? Or is that man you saw in the park, the 80-year-old moving with grace, proof that we are missing a critical piece of the puzzle in how we nourish ourselves? Is it possible that the heaviness people feel isn't an expiration date, but rather a cry for help from a body that isn't getting what it needs to stay upright?
You've hit on the most crucial point, Jane. It is absolutely not a losing battle. In fact, it is one of the most reversible aspects of aging if you know which levers to pull. The reason that 80-year-old was gliding while the 60-year-old struggled often comes down to the quality of the biological fuel they are providing to their muscle cells. You see, as we age, our bodies become less efficient at turning regular food into muscle tissue, a concept we call anabolic resistance. It means a 60-year-old can't just eat the same way they did at 30 and expect the same results. Their muscles are literally starving for specific triggers like the amino acid leucine or high-quality proteins, but because they don't know this, they keep eating healthy in a general sense while their legs continue to wither. The science tells us that we can actually reawaken these dormant muscle fibers. I have seen patients who could barely stand without assistance transform their mobility in just a matter of months by shifting their focus to these 6 specific foods we're going to discuss. We are talking about a total cellular recalibration. That heaviness you mentioned, that's often just the body's way of saying it has run out of the specific building blocks required to maintain strength. When we provide those blocks, the transformation can be nothing short of miraculous, regardless of whether you are 60, 70, or 90. The secret isn't in a bottle of pills, it's in understanding that your legs are a living, breathing engine that simply needs a different grade of fuel as the miles add up.
Doctor, I often hear from our listeners who feel a sense of quiet resignation, as if they are watching their own strength slip away like sand through their fingers, and they tell me that their doctors simply shrug and say it is a part of getting older. It seems so heartbreaking to me that someone would just accept that they can no longer play with their grandchildren or walk to the mailbox because they believe their body has reached its expiration date. I wonder if you have encountered someone who felt they were at the end of their rope, someone who truly believed that their weakness was an incurable sentence, and how you managed to convince them that their muscles still had a spark of life left in them despite what the calendar said.
Jane, I remember so clearly a man named Robert Miller, a 72-year-old retired teacher living in a quiet suburb of Ohio, who came to see me with his head bowed, looking like he had already surrendered to a wheelchair. Robert told me he had stopped going to his weekly bridge club because the 3 small steps leading into the community center felt like climbing Mount Everest, and he was terrified that his legs would simply buckle in front of everyone. He lived in this constant state of hypervigilance, always looking for a chair to lean on or a wall to touch, and his previous physician had told him to just take it easy and accept the slow decline. I sat him down and explained that his muscles weren't dead, they were just in a deep sleep because he was missing the critical amino acid called leucine, which acts like a biological ignition switch for muscle repair. I told him that muscle loss is not a destiny, it is a metabolic state that we can interrupt with the right chemistry, and I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes that slowly turned into a tiny flame of hope. Robert started a specific regimen focusing on high-quality protein and leucine-rich foods, and within just 6 weeks, he called me with a voice that was shaking with emotion, not weakness. He told me he had not only climbed those 3 steps, but had walked 4 blocks to the park just to sit and watch the birds, something he hadn't done in 2 years. It was as if he had reclaimed a lost territory of his own life, proving that the human body does not have a fixed expiration date for strength if we stop starving it of the essentials.
It is so moving to hear about Robert, but I think many people would worry that they have waited too long or that their specific ailments make such a recovery impossible for them personally. We see so many advertisements for supplements and miracle pills that promise to restore youth, yet people remain skeptical because they have been disappointed so many times before. How do you address that deep-seated skepticism in patients who have spent thousands of dollars on empty promises and are now wary of even the simplest dietary advice? Is it really as simple as a few changes in what we put on our plates, or is there something more profound happening beneath the surface of the skin that we need to understand?
The skepticism is completely justified because the market is flooded with synthetic fixes that don't address the core biological reality of an aging muscle cell. I always tell my patients that no pill in the world can build a muscle fiber. Only the body can do that when it is given the correct instructions through nutrition. In Robert's case, we didn't use expensive supplements. We used the power of real food to overcome what we call anabolic resistance, where the body becomes deaf to the signals that tell it to grow. After 60, your body needs almost double the amount of protein to get the same muscle-building signal that a 20-year-old gets from a small snack. Most people are eating like they are still in their 30s, consuming just enough to survive but not enough to thrive, and their legs are the first to pay the price. When Robert understood that his weakness was a nutritional deficiency rather than a character flaw or a natural law of aging, it changed everything for him. He realized he wasn't broken, he was just underfueled for the stage of life he was in. This isn't about chasing youth, it's about maintaining the dignity of movement. And that starts with the realization that your muscles are incredibly resilient and are just waiting for you to give them the right tools to rebuild.
That distinction between eating to survive and eating to thrive is so powerful, doctor, because I know so many seniors who are incredibly disciplined with their diets. They avoid salt, they avoid sugar, they eat their vegetables religiously, and yet they still find themselves feeling frail and exhausted by midday. It's a frustrating paradox where they feel they are doing everything right according to the standard health books, but their bodies aren't reflecting that effort in terms of actual strength. Why is it that a traditional healthy diet often fails the over 60 population when it comes to maintaining their leg strength and balance?
Jane, this is one of the most common frustrations I hear, and it breaks my heart because these people are trying so hard. The problem is that a healthy diet for a 30-year-old is often a starvation diet for the muscles of an 80-year-old. Many seniors move toward a more plant-based or light diet, which is great for the heart, but they inadvertently slash their intake of the very proteins that keep them standing. Research from McMaster University has highlighted a specific food that is a total game changer for this age group: plain Greek yogurt. But it has to be the right kind because regular yogurt often lacks the concentrated protein levels and the probiotics necessary for a senior's gut to actually absorb the nutrients. I often see people eating these thin, sugary yogurts thinking they are doing something good, but they are just getting a glucose spike without the muscle support. Greek yogurt is packed with leucine, which I mentioned earlier as the on switch for muscle protein synthesis. Without that switch being flipped, you can eat all the vegetables in the world, but your leg muscles will still continue to atrophy because the body isn't being told to repair them.
So it's not just about the volume of food, but about the specific biological triggers that tell our cells it's time to work. I think many of our listeners might be surprised to hear that something as simple as a cup of Greek yogurt could be more effective than a complicated diet plan. But there is also the issue of digestion, isn't there? Many older adults struggle with dairy or find that their appetite isn't what it used to be, which makes eating large amounts of protein feel like a chore. How do we bridge that gap between what the body needs and what the aging digestive system can comfortably handle without causing more discomfort?
That is a brilliant observation, and it's exactly why Greek yogurt is so superior. The fermentation process actually breaks down much of the lactose, making it far easier on an older digestive tract than a glass of milk or a piece of heavy cheese. Furthermore, the probiotics in high-quality yogurt help heal the gut lining, which often thins as we age, leading to poor nutrient absorption. I tell my patients to think of it as a 2-for-1 deal. You're getting the building blocks for your legs and the delivery crew to make sure those blocks actually reach the muscle. I've had patients who were so weak they could barely walk across a room, and by simply adding 1 cup of unsweetened Greek yogurt with a few berries every morning, they reported feeling a sturdiness in their legs within just a few weeks. It's about being strategic. We have to stop thinking about food as just calories and start seeing it as information. When you eat that yogurt, you are sending a message to your thighs and calves that says, "We are not retiring yet, we are staying in the game." It is a simple, accessible habit that bypasses the need for heavy meals while providing the intense punch of nutrition that an aging body craves.
It's fascinating how a single dietary shift can send such a powerful message to the body, but I also know there are hidden dangers in our habits that we don't even realize are draining our strength. We often focus so much on what we should add that we forget to look at what we are missing or what we are doing wrong that might be sabotaging our progress. I've heard of people who are active and try to stay on their feet, yet they find their balance becoming more precarious every month, leading to a terrifying fear of falling that keeps them trapped indoors. Is there a common mistake or a specific deficiency that you see over and over again in your clinic that acts as a silent thief of mobility for the elderly?
Yes, Jane, there is a silent thief, and it often hides in the absence of healthy fats and the right kind of sunlight. I think of Mary Thompson, an 81-year-old woman from Florida who lived in the Sunshine State but was virtually housebound because she had lost all confidence in her balance. Mary was terrified of the tiny cracks in the sidewalk, fearing a single trip would end her independence forever. When she came to see me, she was eating a very low-fat diet because she was worried about her cholesterol, but in doing so, she had accidentally starved her muscles of omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin D. These aren't just vitamins, they are the oil that keeps the machine running and the glue that holds the muscle fibers together. Research from Washington University has shown that omega-3s actually sensitize the muscle cells to protein, making them more attentive to the food you eat. I suggested she start eating wild-caught salmon twice a week, not the farm kind, which can be full of inflammatory fats, but the wild kind that is rich in the nutrients her body was screaming for. Within 2 months, Mary wasn't just walking to her mailbox. She was taking morning strolls on the beach again. She told me the wobbliness in her knees had simply vanished.
That fear of wobbliness is so relatable. It's that feeling of not being able to trust your own ankles to hold you up. It's interesting that you mentioned wild-caught salmon specifically, because I think many people just buy whatever is on sale at the grocery store without realizing there is a significant biological difference. For someone like Mary, who was already afraid, making that distinction must have felt like a lot of work. How do we help people understand that the quality of these fats is just as important as the protein we discussed earlier, especially when they are living on a fixed income or have limited access to high-end markets?
It's a matter of life and death for independence, so I tell them it's the best investment they can make. Farmed fish often lacks the specific molecular structure of omega-3s that reduces muscle inflammation, which is the very thing that makes an older person's legs feel stiff and heavy. For Mary, that inflammation was like having rust in her joints and noise in her nervous system. By switching to wild salmon, she was essentially cleaning out that rust. The vitamin D in the fish also works directly on the muscle fibers to increase the speed of contraction. This is what gives you that quickness to regain your balance if you slip. If you are deficient in vitamin D, your muscles react too slowly and down you go. Mary's story is so important because it shows that weakness isn't always about a lack of exercise. Sometimes it's about a lack of the biological signals that allow the muscles to function. Once we restored those fats and vitamins, her body regained its natural rhythm. She stopped looking at the ground when she walked and started looking at the horizon again. That shift in posture alone, from looking down in fear to looking up in confidence, is the greatest reward of my work.
There is something so poetic about that, moving from looking at your feet in fear to looking at the horizon in confidence. It's a restoration of dignity as much as it is a restoration of health. I'm curious, doctor, in all your years of practice, is there one particular moment or one patient whose recovery stands out as the ultimate testament to what is possible when we stop treating the elderly as fading away and start treating them as capable of rebuilding? We often hear about the limits of the human body, but I want to hear about a time when those limits were completely shattered by something as simple as a change in nutrition.
Every time I see a patient reclaim their stride, it feels like a victory against the darkness. But the case of James Wilson, a 68-year-old former carpenter from California, really stands out. James came to me complaining of agonizing nighttime leg cramps and a heaviness that made him feel like he was walking through deep water every single day. He was a man who had worked with his hands and legs his whole life, and losing that strength felt like losing his very identity. He was particularly frustrated because he had tried all the standard advice, stretching, drinking more water, but nothing worked. I looked at his diet and realized he was completely missing choline and vitamin B12, which are essential for the electrical wiring between the brain and the leg muscles. I pointed him towards something very humble: eggs. Not just the whites, but the yolks, because that's where the choline lives. Choline is the precursor to acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter that literally tells your muscles to contract and relax. Harvard research has shown that this connection is often what fails in seniors, leading to that unreliable feeling in the legs.
It's incredible to think that something as common as an egg could be the key to fixing a problem that felt so structural and permanent to someone like James. I think we often overlook the simplest solutions because we assume that a big problem requires a big, complicated medical intervention. But with James, was it just about adding eggs to his breakfast, or was there a specific way he had to approach this to see the results you're talking about? And how long did it take before he started to feel that the electrical wiring, as you put it, was finally being repaired?
It was remarkably fast, Jane. James started having 2 eggs every morning, poached or lightly boiled to keep the nutrients intact, and within just 1 month, the nighttime cramps that had haunted him for years completely vanished. But more importantly, the lag time between his brain and his feet disappeared. He told me that for the first time in a decade, his legs felt light again, as if the connection had been upgraded from an old dial-up line to high-speed fiber optics. This is because choline and B12 work together to maintain the myelin sheath, the protective coating on our nerves. When that coating wears thin, the signal to move your legs gets garbled, leading to weakness and lack of coordination. By the 3-month mark, James was back in his workshop standing for hours at a time building furniture for his grandchildren. He wasn't just better for a 68-year-old, he was stronger than many 50-year-olds I know. It proves that our bodies are constantly eavesdropping on our diets, and when we give them the right instructions, they are more than capable of staging a spectacular comeback.
James's story is a powerful reminder that our bodies are always listening, but I think many of us are deaf to the early warnings our bodies send us. We wait until we can't walk or until we have a serious fall before we take action, but there must be subtle signs, little whispers of weakness that appear long before the crisis hits. If we could learn to recognize these early red flags, perhaps we could prevent so much of the suffering and loss of independence that we've been discussing. What are those first, almost invisible signs that our leg muscles are starting to fail us? And what is the one nutrient that is often the first to go missing during this stage?
That is such a vital question, Jane, because prevention is always more graceful than repair. I often think of Eleanor Brooks, an 89-year-old woman from New York who was the epitome of grace, but had started to notice that she was using the arms of her chair to push herself up every time she stood. She dismissed it as just being tired, but that is actually a classic early sign of magnesium deficiency and the loss of explosive power in the quads. Other signs include a slight dragging of the toes, where you find yourself tripping over the edge of a rug, or a strange tightness in the calves that doesn't go away with rest. Eleanor also mentioned she was having trouble sleeping because her legs felt restless at night. These aren't just quirks of aging, they are cries for magnesium. Over 70% of people over 60 are deficient in this mineral, and it's a disaster for leg strength because magnesium is required for over 300 biochemical reactions, including the one that creates energy within the muscle cells. Without it, your muscles are literally running on an empty tank.
It's so easy to dismiss those signs, pushing off a chair or a slight trip, as just a momentary lapse in focus. But hearing you describe them as cries for magnesium makes it feel so much more urgent. For Eleanor, who was nearly 90, I imagine there was a lot of pressure to just act her age and slow down. How did you help her see that these small signs were actually an opportunity to reclaim her strength? And what was the specific dietary change that helped her stop using those chair arms for support?
I told Eleanor that if we could fix her magnesium levels, we could give her back the spring in her step. We focused on dark leafy greens and seeds, but also on the way she was consuming them because magnesium absorption can be tricky for an 89-year-old digestive system. We added pumpkin seeds and magnesium-rich mineral water to her daily routine. Within a few weeks, she noticed that the restless feeling in her legs had stopped, which allowed her to sleep better, which in turn gave her muscles more time to repair. But the real aha moment came about 3 months later. She called me and said, "Doctor, I just realized I haven't touched the arms of my chair all day." She was standing up using nothing but the power of her legs. That pushing off habit is often the first thing to go and the first thing to come back. Eleanor's story shows that even at 89, the body is not finished. It is still capable of responding to the right minerals. It was never about her age. It was about the fact that her muscle cells didn't have the fuel to generate the upward force needed to stand. Once we gave her that fuel, her age became just a number again, and her independence was restored.
It's truly remarkable to hear about Eleanor's progress at 89, but it brings up an interesting point you made about how she was consuming her nutrients. We often assume that if we eat a salad, we've done our duty for the day. But I've heard you mention that for certain vegetables like spinach, the way we prepare them can actually make the difference between gaining muscle and just eating fiber. There's a specific compound in spinach, ecdysterone, that sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. Could you explain why this Popeye vegetable is actually backed by modern science, and more importantly, how our listeners should be eating it to actually see a difference in their leg strength?
You're right, Jane. Ecdysterone is fascinating. There was a study in Germany that showed it could increase leg strength by up to 19% in a relatively short period. But here's the catch. If you boil your spinach until it's a soggy mess, you're losing a huge portion of those active compounds. For the over 60 population, we want to target the fast twitch fibers, the ones that prevent falls. And ecdysterone is like a natural, safe boost for those specific cells. I advise my patients to stop overcooking their greens. When you apply high heat for a long time, you break down the delicate molecular structures that your body needs. Instead, I suggest lightly steaming it for no more than a minute, or better yet, throwing a handful of raw baby spinach into a morning smoothie with some Greek yogurt. This keeps the nutrients intact and makes them much easier for an older gut to process. I've seen people who were struggling with heavy legs find a new sense of lightness and agility just by changing how they prep their greens. It's about preserving the live energy of the plant so it can become the live energy of your muscles.
That's a bit of a revolution for those of us who grew up with overboiled vegetables as a staple. The idea that we might be cooking away the very strength we're trying to build is quite a wake-up call. I can imagine some of our listeners thinking, a smoothie? That seems so modern. But if it's the key to that 19% increase in strength, it's a small price to pay. Do you find that this change in preparation also helps with the absorption issues we discussed earlier? Because if the body can't break down the tough plant fibers, all that ecdysterone is just going to waste, right?
Exactly, Jane. As we age, our stomach acid levels often drop, making it harder to break down raw, tough vegetables. That's why the smoothie or very light steaming is so effective. It mechanically breaks down the cell walls of the spinach, so your body doesn't have to work as hard to get to the gold inside. I had one patient who was so frustrated because she ate salads every day but was still getting weaker. When we switched her to blended greens, her energy levels and her leg stability improved almost immediately. It's like we were pre-digesting the strength for her. This is the kind of practical, science-based shift that can change a life. We are not just eating for flavor anymore, we are eating for function. We are using these plants as a form of biological technology to keep our bodies upright and moving. When you understand the why behind the cooking method, it stops being a chore and starts being a powerful daily ritual for your freedom.
I love that idea, eating for function and treating it as a ritual for freedom. It shifts the perspective from I have to eat this to I am choosing to be strong. We've talked a lot about animal proteins and specific vegetables, but I know there is a whole world of plant-based proteins that people often overlook, especially things like beans and lentils. Some people avoid them because they worry about digestion or gas, but you've mentioned that these can actually provide a sustained release of strength that animal proteins can't match. How do these humble pantry staples play into the recovery of someone who feels their legs are failing them, especially for the very elderly?
You're touching on a very important piece of the puzzle, Jane. While animal protein provides a quick spike of muscle-building signals, plant proteins like lentils and chickpeas provide what I call a slow burn of amino acids that can last for 6 hours or more. This is vital for preventing the muscle breakdown that happens between meals. I remember Eleanor Brooks, who we talked about earlier. She started incorporating a small bowl of well-cooked lentil soup into her lunch. A study out of Canada showed that this kind of consistent, slow-release protein is much more effective at maintaining muscle mass in the long term for people over 80. The secret to the digestion issue is all in the preparation, soaking them overnight and cooking them with a little ginger or cumin. This breaks down the complex sugars that cause bloating. For Eleanor, this wasn't just about protein, it was about the fiber and the anti-inflammatory properties that helped her leg joints feel less stiff in the morning.
So it's about creating a safety net of nutrition that lasts throughout the day rather than just relying on one or two big meals. I think for someone like Eleanor, who is nearly 90, having that steady stream of support must have made a huge difference in her daily confidence. It's not just about being able to stand up once. It's about being able to stay active for the whole afternoon without that crushing fatigue setting in. Did she find that this change helped her endurance as well as her raw strength?
Absolutely. She told me that before the lentils, she would feel done by 2 p.m. and have to nap. After adding them, she had the stamina to walk her small dog in the late afternoon. It's about endurance, yes, but it's also about the reduction in silent inflammation. Many seniors have heavy legs because their muscles are chronically inflamed. The antioxidants in beans and lentils act like a cooling balm for those tissues. I've seen this time and time again. When we combine the quick-acting proteins like Greek yogurt with the slow-acting proteins like lentils, we create a 24-hour muscle support system. It's a small, inexpensive habit. A bag of lentils costs almost nothing, but the payoff is a level of independence that money can't buy. It's the difference between being a spectator in your own life and being an active participant. Eleanor didn't need a miracle. She just needed a consistent, slow-burning fuel source that respected her age and her biology.
We have covered so much ground today, from yogurt to spinach to lentils, but I know there is one final food on your list that often raises eyebrows. It's something that was a staple in previous generations, but has fallen out of favor in modern times, yet you say the science behind it is absolutely stunning when it comes to the most extreme cases of muscle loss. We're talking about organ meats, specifically grass-fed beef liver. For many of our listeners, the mere mention of it might bring back unpleasant childhood memories, but you're saying that for a 90-year-old to feel like they are 30 again, this might be the superfood they've been looking for. Why is this specific food so controversial yet so powerful in your research?
It is controversial because we've been told for decades to avoid organ meats due to cholesterol, but modern research, including some fascinating work out of Australia, is showing that grass-fed beef liver is the most nutrient-dense food on the planet, bar none. It contains a compound called carnosine, which is like a protective shield for muscle fibers, preventing the cross-linking that makes muscles stiff and brittle as we age. It's also the ultimate source of heme iron, which carries oxygen directly to your leg muscles, and CoQ10, which is the spark plug for the energy factories in your cells. I've seen people in their 90s who were practically bedridden start eating just a small amount of liver once a week and experience a surge in leg strength that baffled their other doctors. It's not about eating a giant steak of it, it's about treating it like a high-potency, natural multivitamin. It provides the B12 and the vitamin A that the nervous system needs to send those lightning-fast signals to the feet.
A natural multivitamin. That is a very compelling way to put it, especially for those who are tired of swallowing dozens of pills every morning. But let's be honest, doctor, the taste and the texture are a huge hurdle for most people. If someone is willing to try this for the sake of their mobility, for the sake of being able to walk without a cane again, how do you suggest they prepare it so it's actually palatable? And is there a limit? I imagine with something this potent, you can't just eat it every day without some kind of caution.
You are absolutely right. Caution is key. Because it is so concentrated in vitamin A and copper, you only need about 3 to 4 ounces once a week. Any more than that could be too much for the liver to process. As for the taste, I tell my patients to soak it in milk or lemon juice for an hour before cooking. This removes that metallic iron flavor that people dislike. Then saute it quickly with plenty of onions and garlic, or even grind it up and mix it into a regular beef patty so you don't even know it's there. I had a patient who was almost 90 and couldn't walk without a walker. She started having a tiny bit of liver patty on crackers once a week. Within 3 months, she was walking unassisted. She called it her magic potion. It's not magic, of course, it's just providing the body with the rarest, most essential raw materials it needs to repair the engine of the legs. When you're at that stage of life, you don't have room for empty calories. Every bite has to count, and nothing counts more than liver. It is the ultimate tool for someone who refuses to let their age define their boundaries.
As we come to the end of this incredible journey through the science of strength, I am struck by one recurring theme: hope. You've shown us that whether it's through the simple addition of Greek yogurt, the careful preparation of spinach, or the potent nutrition of beef liver, Our bodies are not waiting to fail. They are waiting to be fed. It's a message that challenges everything we think we know about getting older. For the person listening right now who feels overwhelmed, who looks at their walker or their cane and feels a sense of despair, what is the one thing you want them to carry in their heart as they finish this episode? Is it ever truly too late to start? And what is the first step they should take today to reclaim the freedom of their own 2 feet?
Jane, if there is only one thing your listeners remember, let it be this. Your body is a miracle of adaptation, and it never stops wanting to heal. It doesn't matter if you are 60 or 96. The moment you start giving your muscles the correct biological instructions, they will begin to respond. I have seen it in Robert, in Mary, in James, and in Eleanor. People who were told their walking days were over, but who are now out in the world, living with vigor. You don't have to change everything at once. Pick 2 of the foods we talked about today. Maybe start with the Greek yogurt and the eggs, and just be consistent for 3 weeks. Consistency is the language of the body. When you show up for your muscles, they will show up for you. Strength is not just about muscle mass. It's about the independence to visit your friends, the dignity of dressing yourself, and the joy of a sunset walk. You are not a fading candle. You are a complex, resilient system that is simply waiting for the right fuel. Do not accept weakness as your destiny. You have the power to rewrite your story 1 meal at a time. It has been an absolute honor to share these truths with you today. Thank you for having me, and to everyone listening, keep moving, keep nourishing, and never give up on yourselves.
Dr. Gupta, thank you for bringing so much light and science-backed hope to a topic that is so often shrouded in fear. You've given us more than just a grocery list. You've given us a roadmap back to ourselves. To our listeners, if this conversation touched you, if it gave you that spark of maybe I can do this, please don't let that feeling fade. Your journey to a stronger, more independent life starts with the very next thing you put on your plate. We are so grateful to have you as part of our community here at Healthy Kidneys After 60. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe to our channel and share this with someone you love who might be struggling with their mobility. We have so many more deep dives into the secrets of aging gracefully and powerfully coming your way. Until next time, I'm Jane Pauley. Take care of yourselves, believe in your body's ability to change, and we will see you in the next episode.